Everywhere you look, you see little lakes, ponds, there's water everywhere.
That water is the economic lifeblood of this region. That's why the port is here. That's why the military is here. It serves the world's largest naval base. And flooding is impacting all the bases in Hampton Roads.
It's not possible to wall off all that water. There's just too much.
The Chesapeake Bay, the rivers, all the inlets, they surround and penetrate all the cities.
Before the Navy came in, this was just a bunch of marshland. They built the bases, they built housing for the bases, they built shops for the houses, and that's what created Hampton Roads.
Hampton Roads, it's a center of gravity for the United States as a port, as a national security center.
We have to have sailors that are ready to go to fight our nation's battles. And that training is done here. And the ability for them to go home and see their families is part of what makes them capable of going out and fighting our nation's wars when called upon. If this installation is not ready to support our warfighting platforms, then those warfighting platforms are less capable when they do go out and fight.
When our sailors and their families are negatively affected by the floods, it puts our national security at risk. Flooding is happening more frequently. It's happening on sunny days. I cannot drive on the road that's adjacent to my house 20–30% of the month. We can't, as a city, afford that ourselves. We need support from the region, we need support from the state, we need support from the nation.
There's 80 years from the turn of the century. We have the ground sinking and the waters rising. This entire landscape will be different then. And how different it is and what it looks like is up to us to determine. But if we don't start acting now, it will get ahead of us and it will become much more costly, much more difficult, and we will not have the ability to make as many decisions for our future as we do right now.
Right center rudder, steady course, 150, I said. Submarine is right.
With over 80 ships and 30-plus squadrons and 10-plus submarines, it's our largest naval base, naval concentration area, if you would, in the world, is right there in the greater Hampton Roads area. And we're not going anywhere. We, along with the community, have to figure out how we're going to address this challenge.
The Hampton Roads region has been in use by military and merchant mariners since pre-Revolutionary War times. There's always been a presence here because of its proximity to the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. The region is 17 cities and municipalities that stretch from the peninsula, Williamsburg, south to the far eastern corner of Tidewater, Virginia. There are federal facilities scattered throughout the 17 cities and municipalities. A substantial number of them are military. So there are things here that can't go anywhere else.
This area was almost an island served by ferries and boats until they began to build bridge tunnels.
The dream of many generations of Virginians comes true as the great Chesapeake Bay Bridge and Tunnel Complex is dedicated. The 18-mile crossing has 4 man-made islands connected by tunnels to allow ships to pass overhead. There is a toll, of course, but the $4 charge saves time, gasoline, and frazzled nerves. It's Virginia's link to the future.
This is the Ghent section of Norfolk. We're really in one of the ground zero places for sea level rise in this area. This church was built between 1909 and 1910. It has a basement where we do have some facilities, but we are in the process of abandoning those because of ongoing water intrusion. So there's been many a Sunday morning where I've had to send out to the parish photographs of where the flooding is and guidance for people where they might park so that they don't get caught in the flooding.
When you have a big rain event, it's almost, in some ways, when it comes to transportation, similar to a snow event. You know, you can't get your kids to school, you can't get to the store. When the remnants of Hurricane Matthew came through, which was a lot of rain, you know, a lot of roads in the neighborhoods in particular, you just had so much standing water, they were impassable. That happened to hit on a weekend, so, you know, most churches in the area, including my church, you know, we're closed that day. Morning, Ted. Good morning, sir. So, like any other event that makes it difficult to get to work, you know, recurrent flooding does the same thing to us.
It floods just about every time we get a hard or long rain here. I've gotten in water up to the middle of my car door. You feel the muffler go underneath the water, and you know it's a bad sign. It's made getting home take anywhere from 3 to 4 to 5 hours sometimes, or you got to try to find another way around.
It was flooded, there was a lot of traffic, and we decided to go down Princess Anne. And we're not very familiar with the area either. There's a giant puddle in front of us. I thought it was like, oh, it's nothing, it's small. We drive through and it's almost touching my windshield, and we get stuck.
My husband has been active duty in the Navy for 11 years. When there are storms here, they take the Navy ships out, so my husband would have to leave on the ship. But when it floods, he may not be able to get to the base. And he has kind of an important job on his ship. He's a navigator. So ship can't go anywhere if he can't go anywhere.
You know, the ships you see, you know, all what we call sortie if a storm is coming. I mean, they all come to go out to sea because we don't want a ship here sitting at the waterfront get slammed against the pier by a storm.
If you sortie ships to evade a storm, and then you have another requirement elsewhere in the world, in all likelihood, many of those ships will not be prepared at that exact moment in time to proceed on to a further event. They would have to return to port, prepare themselves quickly, and then go to execute whatever mission is assigned. Constant environmental challenges degrade readiness over time, which could impede our ability to operate downrange. I am a surface warfare officer, ship driver. Spent 31 years driving ships. I retired as a rear admiral, and my last command was command of the amphibious forces on the east coast of the United States. There's a certain element to living here, dealing with water, that adds a little element of stress to daily life. Those of us that live here all the time have kind of gotten used to it, but you move here from California and the first night you drive home and realize you need to wait up your street, that's sort of a shock. And that's a little stressor. And the stresses add up over time, especially in a military life. It's stressful enough.
It's unnecessary stress, and it's stress that a lot of people here in this region have to go through. They don't always have the convenience of having family nearby to help them out. So when a service member leaves and they leave their family behind who've never experienced this, it affects the way they work, the way they do their job, the way they can complete their mission.
I think if you look at the Navy family, most of it lives in those communities. So, whether they own a house, whether they rent a house, that sailor is also a Sunday school teacher, that sailor is also a Little League coach. We count on the community. The community provides us the utilities, electrical power, water, sewage, the transportation infrastructure that we need. Pretty difficult to get the people onto the base if they're driving down roads that have standing water on them.
Thunderstorms roared through Southside Hampton Roads, bringing very heavy rain that fell fast and hard.
This woman who lives across the street here, do you see her sign? No wake zone. All of these cars that have been coming through here, well, the water is so deep that it is sending waves into her flower bed there.
Hampton Boulevard is one of the main connectors to the Navy base. Normal high tides, this intersection will start to flood. If we get a little bit abnormal high, the intersection will be completely flooded and impassable. Not just here, but down a few hundred feet down, there's another intersection that will get flooded as well, basically stopping traffic from going to the Navy base.
This water treatment plant provides nearly 5 million gallons a day of water to Norfolk Naval Base. Also to Oceana, to Fort Story, to Little Creek Amphibious Base. We also collect sewage from the Naval Base, and we pump that sewage to the Regional Sewage Authority, and they treat it and release it.
This is a major electrical substation that feeds Naval Station Norfolk. This area does flood. It increases the frequency of power outages to the base. The biggest problem we had with power when I was the commanding officer was losing power to the piers at high tide because the electrical cables would be inundated in seawater. That is still a problem. It has grown worse. And the commanding officer today has to turn off the electrical power to the piers. That was not a problem when those piers were built in the 1940s through the 1960s. But with sea level rise, now it's a problem.
Behind us is Pier 1 here at Naval Station Norfolk. It's one of 13 primary piers that we have, and it's one of our older piers. So all the utilities for this pier run right under the pier deck, and you can see there's not a lot of clearance between those utilities and the water. And so if you were to imagine this during a storm event, you get debris washing under the pier, and then that wave action will slam that debris up against our utilities, and we can at times have some significant damage to the utilities on our piers.
It obviously does have an impact on our ability to project power because we need to be able to deploy those forces when directed to deploy those forces. But the water that we get from the community or that electrical power we get from the community isn't any good if the pumps are underwater or the substation's underwater.
There's also the question to the economy of the United States. Those regional impacts can mean that the entire United States economy is affected. If you're in a landlocked part of the nation, you might experience delays and effects as these impacts accelerate.
Almost all imports and exports to and from the United States travel by sea. Hampton Roads is critically important for movement of freight coming from Europe, from South Asia, all the way from China through the Panama Canal. That cargo goes all the way to Chicago and all the major cities in between. The port here is also a major export port. Agricultural products, especially, also coal. Hampton Roads is the largest coal exporting port on the east coast of the United States. Clearly, sea level rise is happening. The U.S. military, they see the problem. They're doing very thorough assessments of all their bases and developing plans to protect those bases. And they expect the communities around those bases to do the same thing. The naysayers, by trying to pretend that this is not a problem and is not worthy of funding to adapt to sea level rise, they are jeopardizing U.S. national security and they are jeopardizing the U.S. economy.
The committee will come to order. The U.S. military should be focused on defending American citizens, not serving as a playground for the green energy movement.
These activities are simply not the mission of the U.S. military. The military's mission is to train for and fight our nation's wars. To me, it just makes no sense whatsoever.
Let's go!
Osama bin Laden. The United States searched for him for years. And finally, it was a U.S. Navy team that found him and eliminated him. That training was done right here in Hampton Roads. And if they cannot conduct that training, they're not going to be ready for deployment to carry out a very complex, high-risk mission like that.
This is a risk management issue. Think of an insurance company or the reinsurers. They are deeply, reinsurers in particular, concerned about the changes to our environment because their payouts are going to increase as these changes continue to occur.
The challenge for the Navy and for the federal entities here is, what's our plan? And how do we collaborate with the regional area, with the communities, to develop that plan that will support a resiliency and adaptive strategy that will allow this region to continue to operate?
When we look at the challenges that Navy faces down in the Tidewater area, the only way to solve a challenge like sea level rise is through a whole of government approach. Federal government, state government, local government, all working together on a common problem, trying to find a common solution that they can all support and then that they all commit resources. I don't think that we as a nation have worked on a challenge that really requires all these different federal agencies, state agencies, and local government organizations to work together. And then you also have to bring in the private sector. So how do you organize, to be able to do that? Who are the deciders? This is not an easy challenge to overcome, but it's also a challenge that we have to overcome.
We will be incorporating into a report.
Having 17 different legislative bodies is difficult from the standpoint of getting compromise on a specific issue.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming by. Welcome to City Hall.
One of the things I hear regularly from my constituents is, why aren't we doing more?
And if it's overnight, we won't even know it's happening. And that's really scary.
We're also looking at possibly an ordinance or legislation about when the roads are flooded, creating no wake zones. Certainly we're all frustrated that there's not a fix tomorrow, because we live in a society where we want things to happen quickly. And these fixes are going to take years, possibly decades. We're working to do as much as we can, and we just need to continue working with our state and federal legislators. Getting support at those higher levels requires good regional cooperation. And until we have that, we're not able to make the changes that are necessary.
We are headed to the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission meeting to see what's on their agenda for the rest of the year. My interest in attending stems from some of this work that I've done locally on sea level rise, resiliency planning and adaptation planning. And of course, the Planning District Commission plays a huge role in how that will take place regionally. This is Llewellyn Avenue. You can see from the flooding marker over here, it's a routine flooder. This is strictly high tide flooding. Tide's high in about 45 minutes here. And so in 45 minutes, I won't be able to get through there. That's life here.
To remain a very high regional priority. So, Madam Chair, I'll conclude my comments by certainly responding to any questions in terms of a recommended action.
Yes. Given the fact that what we just experienced recently with regards to flooding, I'm surprised that's not in this agenda. Would it be somewhere else?
So we could add something if that's the direction the commission would like to go. What we would need to determine would be what the specific ask would be. So.
Yes. May I recommend that we take a look at possibly asking for funding for the revolving fund to help homeowners with mitigation of flood damages. It is a revolving fund that has no money in it. It is a shell with nothing in it. It is another unfunded mandate, and it seems to me that would be something that would be a very distinct and actionable item.
Thank you.
All right, we'll just take that recommendation into consideration. Our next speaker is Ms. Karen Spates. Good morning.
Good morning, committee members and all those in attendance. Thank you for allowing me a time to speak. I am here as a resident of the city of Norfolk. I live in Chesterfield Heights. My concern is flooding. I'm a caregiver, so one of my problems is getting home to take care of my mother.
We can get trapped in, and where I live, when it floods, I can't leave my house. Now during a really bad event, we were in our house for 3 days and couldn't leave.
Periods of rain off and on today. Say we could get up to a half an inch of rain before it's all said and done by the end of the day. The high today, 51.
Evacuation orders are in place for some, while others are hunkering down for whatever this storm delivers.
If we're having this problem throughout, just not Norfolk, but the other surrounding cities and places of flooding that never flooded before, how will they respond to all of this, and where will we go? I went and bought a life vest for my mom because I was frightened for her safety. And once that water comes in, how do you get out? I know I can get out, but how do I get her out? Hey, Mom. I got something for you. This is just in case, you know, in emergency, if we need to get out or you get sick or something. So I bought you a life jacket.
Me and a life jacket.
Yeah, I bought you a life jacket so you know, so you can put it on. And you see, you just put your arms in it like that. And just in case we have to go out there in that water and get to safety, just so we'll be okay.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
You're so nice.
I know.
You just do stuff like this all the time. Very nice.
Thank you.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. You having a good day?
Yeah.
All right.
Kind of slow, but good.
I wish you could have been with us last Sunday morning as the waters rose outside. You know, once again, our basements and our homes were flooded. And yet, 35 of us gathered in the choir section of the church to celebrate communion and sing hymns. And that's the marvelous thing. We're here facing these huge challenges of sea level rise, and yet we don't despair, we come together.
I have talked about it as a moral issue. The people who are most impacted are the poor, are the people who don't have the money to make the necessary structural changes in where they live. And so many of the people who are struggling economically are the first ones to deal with the flooding and be displaced from their homes. So I think we have a moral obligation as a church.
Our Civic League is having an oyster roast. We do it every fall, and the neighbors all come and we eat, drink, and be merry. Today we have one of our neighbors who is a zoning official with the city of Norfolk to tell us about the new flood zone maps that have just been released. Because every 5 years, the federal government changes the flood zones, and that will affect your property and whether you need flood insurance or don't.
If you have a federally insured mortgage and you live in a flood zone, you do have flood insurance. If water comes in your house during a storm and it comes in the front door, that has to be handled by flood insurance. Your homeowner's insurance will not cover that at all.
I've lived here in this house since 1979. Water comes up underneath from the ground up. It seeps under the wall, not just over the wall. It goes over the wall when we have nor'easters and hurricanes. But we just have a lot of water that used to not come up this high. I mean, we have 5 sump pumps for this house alone. Some people don't want to admit that there's a problem. Water is the water, and if it comes up, it comes up. It doesn't matter what your politics are, it still comes in my yard, in my basement.
I retired from the Navy recently and moved back down here to Norfolk, which, I had this house when I was up in D.C., but lived in D.C. while I was working in the Pentagon.
Chicken works, but I tell you what, this works better than chicken for me.
As an engineer, what I go by is facts. So down here in the Norfolk area, the facts are that the sea level is rising. The facts are is the land is subsiding. So it's the double whammy. You know, water's coming up and the land's going down. But, you know, I think that most of the people around here, you know, they're not looking for a miracle. They understand that, you know, we live in a low-lying area. What people are looking for is what can be done to make us maybe a little more resilient.
Resilience is the ability of a city, a system, or a individual to, first of all, survive, then adapt, and then thrive in the face of a stress or a potential shock.
Resilience is the ability of a society or an organization to have a disturbance that knocks them off their 100% functionality, and then to be able to withstand, resist, and recover as quickly as possible. It's effectively toughness. Can you take a licking and keep on ticking? You have to work at toughness. You work at it by really thinking through what the scenario for the future could hold for you.
I think personal resilience or individual resilience is the key to a city's resilience. So the more individuals in my community build their own resilience, the more resilient the city becomes.
Over time, the bulkhead behind our property has begun to fail. So the challenge is, how do you prevent your yard from rolling away into the creek as it comes up higher and higher over time? That's something that has gotten me interested in wetlands restoration because we're suffering from it here. What we're doing today is siting locations for trees that are native species that have been donated to us by the city of Norfolk. Kind of right in front of your house, so certainly we're in the vicinity with these two. The question is, do we put one over here? The Wetlands Project will help make my property more resilient because it will encourage natural replenishment of marsh grasses, marsh structure and growth, and it will also reduce runoff from my property and from other properties that's silting up the creek here. Things are happening to people. They are experiencing challenges with water that are not known or understood by the larger community, and in particular by their government, their city council, their elected officials. So if they don't bring forward the issues that they're faced with, it's possible, and in many circumstances, I think right here, right now, it's true that their governments won't know the challenges they're experiencing.
The solutions for flooding, they are going to be created by new entrepreneurs. And how do we monetize that? How do we make that a big part of the business sector? How do we create a new industry?
The city of 100 years from now won't be recognizable to most of the people who are alive today. We'll have water in different places, which we will use as connectors across the city. Harnessing water for energy, harnessing water to enhance your landscape. We believe we're creating a market for innovation and manufacturing and then maintenance of these new water management systems. The market for those kinds of opportunities is growing very quickly because so many people live on the coast, and we're going to have to figure this out together. We're a nation of innovators, we're a nation of doers, and we are a nation that has been highly successful in protecting its security and its way of life. And so, in order to continue to have a nation that thrives, we need to look at the risks at the front end, see what steps we can take now to reduce the damage on the back end. Whether it's terrorist, cyber, pandemic, nuclear, or the threats to the environment.
Patriotic to me means putting country above self. But patriotic doesn't mean I always get what I want. Patriotic means what's the right thing for our country? How do we work together to achieve those right things for our country? I really believe that you need to be in public service, whether it's politics, whether it's the military, for something bigger than yourself. And that thing bigger than yourself is where you need to take some risk. And my frustration when I see votes along a partisan line or something like that, that kind of infuriates me. You know, it's like, vote your heart, vote your conscience, what's good for the country, not what's good for my party.
It's not going to come without pain. It's hard. Collaboration is very hard and difficult. But if this region can figure out a way to collaboratively set standards and plan towards those standards and adapt, then not only can they share with other regions how they do it, but they can share with regions around the world, really, how to take a very complex set of entities that all have to fit together in a puzzle and move forward together collectively. That's a real opportunity for this region, but not if it waits to get started.
We're not powerless. We are going to have to be selective about what we choose to protect and what we can't protect because of geography or geology or whatever. But we have the technology, we have the knowledge to protect what is critically important to our country. The cost of doing nothing is much greater than the cost of doing something.
How can we be an exporter of good ideas and good technologies to the rest of the world who are facing similar challenges caused by sea level rise? It's a challenge to our mission. It's a challenge to our way of life. So let's do something about it, because we are pragmatic. How do you make yourself part of the solution and not simply be a victim?